Right. So my role is, so the issue at play here is the possible development. I don't know if that would be through a sale or a long-term lease, but hard infrastructure development, buildings, parking lots, et cetera, of the USF Forest Preserve.
Okay.
So,
And-
so my role is that I am on the USF Forest Preserve Steering Committee.
Okay. Okay. One minute more. We need approval of minutes, and I know that everybody has perused those minutes very, very carefully. So I need a motion to pass the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? We need a second, folks.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Pass. Your turn, David.
Okay. Yeah, so just a little bit of background about our situation right now. Many of you guys already know this. Brief recap of where we are. The university issued an RFI, or a request for information. And what that amounted to was a request for information for development options of the USF Forest Preserve. So it went out to developers. They did not involve any faculty. They certainly didn't involve the USF Forest Preserve Steering Committee in that. It just suddenly went out. The provost claims to have not even known about it until word trickled back to the university that it had been picked up in the media, and concerned citizens and students were asking us about it. So when I say the university put it out, I'm referring specifically to the Senior Vice President for Finance's office. So that would be the office of David Lechner, who was doing it under the auspices of the president and the Board of Trustees, although Mr. Lechner sort of owns the RFI and says the buck stops with him on that, on the issuance of it. So for those of you who don't know what the Forest Preserve is, it is that long stretch of forest you see on the north side of Fletcher Road as you are driving east away from campus. So you may know where the quote unquote the Claw golf course is on the corner of Fletcher and I guess that would be 46th. If you go down Fletcher just to the east of that, after you pass the golf course, you'll go past a bunch of forest on the north side, and then you get to USF's Riverfront Park. All that forested area in between Riverfront and the golf course, and extending about half of the way northward towards the Amberley housing development in New Tampa is Forest Preserve. So it's about a square mile of land.
Folks, just a moment. Can people mute their microphones, please? Thank you.
And it has been, the Forest Preserve has historically been managed by the Department of Integrative Biology. Before that, just the Department of Biology. So for those of you who've been around a while may recall that in the late '80s, the Department of Biology went through a reorganization into the Department of Cellular Microbiology and Molecular Biology on the one hand, and the Department of Integrative Bio on the other hand, and I'm in the Department of Integrative Bio. We have since broadened management of the Forest Preserve, so it now includes representatives from anthropology, geosciences, and integrative biology on terms of the steering committee. One thing that this RFI has made us realize is that we haven't probably done a very good job of making the community aware of the presence of the Forest Preserve, what is there in the Forest Preserve, and the important role it plays for the university in pursuing its mission of student and faculty success. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today now that we have that brief background about the RFI out of the way, I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the value of our forest preserve and what it means for the university. So I have some PowerPoint slides to show you about that. But before I do, I would invite any questions now about what the RFI and our interactions with higher administration. But as I present, you can interrupt me and ask questions too. But are there any questions about, we did meet, I should say, with the provost and Senior Vice President Lechner this morning. This was our first actual meeting with higher administration about this issue. I think go ahead.
What was Mr. Lechner's and the provost's response?
Yeah, the provost, he sort of reiterated his position as sort of the chief academic officer for the university, that he's committed to student success and recognizes that the university needs to take a broad view of all of its assets and how to best deploy those to meet student success. But there wasn't sort of much more coming down on one side or the other than that. The Senior Vice President Lechner was very attentive to faculty, and there was about 5 faculty and a couple deans, 4 faculty and a couple deans on that call this morning. Was very attentive to and receptive to our presentation of how we think that this looks bad in terms of optics for a university that just yesterday put out a press release that we're number 3 in the nation for Times Higher Ed evaluation of our impact on sustainability and equality. And our view that this is a critical teaching and research facility, and that looking at it as a source of revenue versus selling off or leasing, for example, parking lot space, which doesn't further directly the university's teaching and research mission, are 2 different things and really can't be conflated as possible ways to generate revenue streams. So he was very receptive to those things, but despite our suggestions, it doesn't seem like he is going to be withdrawing the RFI. So it is still going to be out there in the marketplace for developers to respond to. So a lot of receptiveness, but I don't know if there was much change in terms of intent. So yeah, so that was this morning's meeting. Okay, well, should I give you guys a quick PowerPoint tour of the Forest Preserve?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, right. So here's the foyer to the Forest Preserve. This is what you see right when you walk in the gate. I cut off a little bit of the picture to put my name here. I just threw that up since this is being recorded. That way you know who it was that was recording it. But the content of this comes from many, many people. So the Forest Preserve is just this remarkably beautiful piece of natural habitat. Actually, it's many pieces of natural habitat that are intact and integrated. I'll get to that in a moment. That's an island, really, within an urbanizing landscape. And it is our island, and it is literally across the street from campus. So where is it? Here it is, outlined in orange. The Claw Golf Course is just to the west of it. In the lower left-hand corner here is the main built part of campus. We consider the Forest Preserve also a part of campus. And then sort of the Amberley housing development is up to the north, and here's Bruceby Downs. So this line right across here and sort of the lower portion of the image is Fletcher Avenue. So if you left campus and drove east towards Lettuce Lake Park, which is just on the far right-hand side of this image, you'd be going past the Forest Preserve. So that's where it is. All right. So next, I want to talk to you a bit about what you can find out there. And then after I do that, I'll talk to you a bit about how we use it and a bit about some of the regulatory implications that are tied up in the way the land is used. So what you can find out there is a great deal of nature and a great deal of human cultural heritage. All right. So I'm just going to start probably with one of the most concerning aspects about proper management of the land, and that it is the land there is host to numerous species of conservation concern. So just among the plants themselves, we have a long list of plants that are formally designated as being threatened or endangered or exploited. So these plants are all confirmed to occur on the Forest Preserve, and they are on state regulatory lists of species of conservation concern. And here's a picture of one of them right here. So that's the plants. The animals, there are also several animal species of concern that are threatened or endangered, or the habitats they live in are rare and imperiled. Here's a picture of a gopher tortoise. This picture's not actually taken at the Forest Preserve. It's taken from Google Images. But there is a large population of gopher tortoises out at the Forest Preserve, and they live in burrows like this. So the Forest Preserve has a particular portfolio of plants and soil conditions that allow for gopher tortoise populations to persist there. And it's not just gopher tortoises, it's a bunch of other animal species. And again, this is not a comprehensive list of the species, but of species that are of noted conservation concern. So that's kind of a zoomed in view of why this land is important, because it houses these species of concern. We can also zoom out to take a regional perspective. Okay, so our Forest Preserve is shown here in this little purple area. Okay, let me turn on my highlighter, show you my PowerPoint chops. This little purple area is the Forest Preserve. It is really the buckle in a wildlife corridor, a green belt, if you will, that extends to the northeast up through Lettuce Lake Park and Hillsborough River Park, and then on into the Green Swamp, sort of out here in the middle part of the peninsula. And then to the north and kind of northwest a bit up into what is called the Cypress Creek floodplain and watershed. So it's a choke point, if you will, and you can see what it would do to this green belt if it were to disappear. There's a lot of biodiversity out there, so I listed some threatened and endangered species. If I were to list all of the species out there, it would have to be 6-point font and a whole bunch of PowerPoint slides. So just among the plants themselves, there are over 400 plant species. And this is one of our failings, is we don't have a full documentation of the animal species, and certainly not of the microbiology that is out there. Biologists, though, I want to emphasize something really important here. Consider biodiversity as more than just a list of species, but the way that they are related to one another. So there are also many relationships that are formed among these life forms. If you think about, say, 1,000 species, how many connections and linkages are there? It's really a staggering amount of diversity. Here's one of my favorite pictures that just sort of captures that. I mean, this is a tree ostensibly, but it's so much more than a tree if you think about all of the other life forms it supports. So the Forest Preserve really reveals to us as researchers and our students this interconnected web of life. And earlier I mentioned that the Forest Preserve is not a habitat, but a collection of habitats. Another important concept in ecology and biology is the idea of an ecological community. So these are distinct multi-species assemblages where groups of species tend to co-occur with one another. And we have identified 12 of these distinct sort of ecological communities or neighborhoods out there. You know, they've got these funny names like xeric hammock and floodplain swamp. So there are a high diversity of these landscape types that are knitted together in a network of habitat types. They're not sitting side by side like cookies on a cookie tray. They're more like pieces of a puzzle. Another one of the other species that are out there that are of conservation concern is Homo sapiens. Okay, so there are numerous archaeological sites at the Forest Preserve that house a lot of cultural heritage. Okay, and some of these sites date back more than 10,000 years. So this isn't just a collection of indigenous peoples that might have been there at the time of European contact, but many layers of human history over millennia. Okay, and these sites include things, these archaeological sites include things like prehistoric campsites, areas where artifacts can be found, or areas that were known to be sort of harvested or exploited by indigenous peoples. And there are also human burials out there. I think in more modern times, we're facing some issues of sort of proper recognition and respect for human burials with you know, finding of African-American graveyards and burial sites in places that are at risk of development or have been paved over. So we have human burials of indigenous peoples out here as well. And these are only the confirmed sites. I got this map from an archaeologist. There's never been a proper full archaeological survey of this area. So much more of this area is undoubtedly of archaeological significance. So that sort of covers what one finds there. And that informs then how we use it, okay? So just how is it we use the Forest Preserve? I want to talk about that a bit next. And I have this title here because it is often described as undeveloped land. That is very much a perspective that might be fostered by a sense that it's available for sale and building on. But I want to emphasize that this is highly developed as a teaching, learning, and community outreach resource for the university. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how we use it. One obvious way we use it is for teaching. Okay, so there are a large number and diversity of teaching activities that occur out at the Forest Preserve. So what we have here are both graduate student training groups, as well as formal undergraduate courses that are all using the preserve. Obviously, very engaged people. Here are a couple of graduate students that were happy to get back into the air conditioning to examine some of the soils and leaf litter that was collected from the place. Here's a training group of graduate students. This particular training group, actually, in this photograph, are graduate students that have been formally identified as students that exhibit significant financial need. So these are the kind of people who, because of economic conditions, might be inclined to take their bachelor's degree and enter the job market rather than invest more time not earning a paycheck in graduate school. But they've chosen to go to graduate school, and so it's an incumbent upon us, I think, to find ways to foster their retention. And this is a kind of learning opportunity that I think excites students. And then here's some undergraduate students in mammalogy and vertebrate natural history laboratories that are taking place out there. Now, we've never had anyone sort of formally assigned, although I'm working with the library to begin doing this. We've never had anyone formally assigned to keep track of all of the ways that this resource gets used. But to the best of my ability and the ability of other members of the steering committee, we have tried to reconstruct some lists. Everybody likes lists. You can't have a PowerPoint slide without bullet points. So here's a list of courses that I know have used the facility just within the last decade. And I want to impress upon you, I mean, if you look at the call numbers here, the variety of different subject matter areas and departments, as well as just the long list. It's just sort of the number of items on this bullet list of classes that have used the Forest Preserve just in the past decade. A couple of these classes, this vertebrate zoology and mammalogy labs, students sort of took ownership of their own interaction with the Forest Preserve and wanted to get a game cam project going. And we've had the same TA in those two classes for a couple of years now. So he's been able to carry this project over across semesters and sort of develop this kind of meta cohort of students. These are just some images that they've captured on the game cameras. Here's a wood stork. Here's a deer. I'm not a hunter, but I don't know, what is that, a 6 or 8 point buck there. Here's a trio of bobcats. So a lot of great wildlife that these students can interact with, and a lot that really inspires them to want to come to a place like USF. So not only do a lot of different classes use it out there, use the Forest Preserve, but if you combine those courses and the research that's conducted there, we also have a long list of different academic units at the university that use it. I said I'm in the Department of Integrative Biology. We are by no means the only department that benefits from this teaching and learning resource. So here's a list, again, that I've been able to sort of scratch up from memory of, and I'm probably missing some, of academic units that have used it in the past decade. And here's yours truly measuring some greenhouse gases out there. So sticking with the research theme for a moment, this is not only a naturally productive landscape, it's an academically productive one as well. Again, without the benefit of sort of a formal archiving of use of the place. You know, about, I guess 8 years ago now it's been, time sure does fly. In 2013, myself and other members of the Forest Preserve Steering Committee, as it existed at the time, tried to cobble together a list of the different research products that have come from the place. And during this 5-year period prior to that, 20 different graduate student theses and dissertations have been focused on the preserve, and we were able to identify 70 publications in the peer-reviewed academic literature conducted at the preserve. And of course, there's a lot of grant money attached to all of that research activity. And instead of a natural photograph here of students bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out in the field looking at snakes, the image I chose here was just to reflect this thesis and dissertation productivity with the cover page of one of the theses. And I want to point out the title of this thesis. This is long-term effects of prescribed fire on reptile and amphibian communities in a Florida sandhill. So there's a lot to unpack there. You know, reptiles and amphibians don't just need a place to live, which the Forest Preserve provides, but they need that habitat to be of a particular nature. Okay, and so the Forest Preserve is a place where we have been able to do research like fire ecology. I mean, where else can you walk across the street from an urban campus and do fire ecology? I mean, how cool is that? Okay, so here's a picture of one of these prescribed burns. And the Forest Preserve has taught us, not just us at USF, but the scientific community more broadly, a lot about many things, whether it's gopher tortoises, biology, or fire ecology, or archaeology. So it's not just a convenient teaching resource. It is also important more broadly to the academic community as a whole, because some of the discoveries there are truly foundational. And one of the things that allows us to do transformative research there goes back to the point I made earlier about how this is really an integrated, connected network of multiple habitat types. Okay, so the word we would use in geosciences for that is a catena. All right, so what the forest preserve provides is this integrated network of habitat types that grade from sandhill uplands, where you can find cactuses, yes, in rainy, wet Florida, cactuses, down into wetland swamps, and then all of those other habitat types in between. So what does that mean to have this catena type hill slope environment? Well, as you move from the top to the bottom, lots of things change. Hydrology, geology, soils, plants and animals, microorganisms, patterns of human land use. And these things change in a parallel, interconnected way. Changes in hydrology create the changes in the plant community, which create the changes in the animal community, which determine how humans have historically utilized different patches in that landscape in different ways. So one thing the land does is it reveals the interdisciplinarity of many STEM knowledge domains, okay, in a way that would be hard to replicate elsewhere, right? And so this interdisciplinary, this integrated, this cross-boundary STEM thinking is the kind of thing that employers look for. So it serves our students an important service. It provides our students an important learning service to have this there, and it is also an important recruitment tool for new faculty. So sort of the last chapter here of my talk is what this might mean for sustainability and USF's sustainability mission, as well as some regulatory implications. Right. One thing I want to point out is that this recent RFI, request for development, request for information on development options, is at odds with our own campus master plan. So here are just some quotes from the master plan. All right, the university shall protect natural resources, and later in the sentence, reflecting that the forest preserve shall not be developed. One of the objectives, number 4.2, is to preserve and protect existing natural resource areas, including the forest preserve. And the forest preserve is considered unavailable for development. This is just 3. There's like 15 instantiations of the forest preserve in the master plan. And I just want to point out just yesterday, as this image captures from our own website, the university has been recognized for its global impact by Times Higher Education on sustainability and equality, following about 17 different UN sustainability benchmarks. So selling this off to some developers seems really at odds with that. Before, I also talked about gopher tortoises and other critters needing habitat, not just space, but habitat of a particular nature. I want to emphasize how imperiled some of that habitat is. So here is a map of elevation used with some remote sensing technology. The forest preserve is in the boundaries of this pink line. All right, see this gray area here that extends kind of into the North Temple Terrace neighborhoods and campus proper? That tiny little bit, just a thumbnail really, is over 50% of the county's inventory of that type of scrub habitat that the gopher tortoises rely on. This is from a logistical standpoint. I think from a construction or engineering standpoint, this is really the only developable part of this property. And this is all really that's left in the region of that kind of habitat. So we have a super, super imperiled habitat type here that I think would be kind of a disgrace to to do anything else with besides preserve and teach with. Another sustainability thing that the university does for us, actually, I'm going to skip a slide and then come back to this one. The Forest Preserve helps USF align with many of its sustainability partners and initiatives. I'm not going to read all of this. I just want the weight of text to impress upon you. The many sustainability partnerships and initiatives that USF has and makes us look good when people are choosing where to go to college, and makes us look good as society as a whole pivots into a blue-green economy. One of the things that allows the university to live up to its commitments to some of these initiatives, and that allows us to get formal recognition from them, is the Forest Preserve, okay? Because the Forest Preserve provides a lot of free benefits for society. Those of us that study these things for a living refer to them as ecosystem services. All right, but they are natural benefits for society that a proper resource economist that's just sort of not caught up in just the immediate sellable, marketable value of something, recognizes that these free benefits are monetizable in a modern blue-green economy. And just for a quick example, there are probably $1.5 to $2 million worth of carbon credits just sitting in that landscape, right? It amounts to about 20 to 25,000 tons of carbon. And I know 20 to 25,000 tons of carbon is hard to visualize, so my best way to help you visualize that would be about 50 to 60 fully loaded with people and luggage and fully fueled up 747 jumbo jets. So about 50 to 60 jumbo jets fully loaded and fueled. That's about how much the carbon in the Forest Preserve weighs. And then it provides other services too. So it scrubs a lot of the air pollution from Bruce B. Downs and Fletcher Road. Also, the base of that Katina, that hill slope, drains through wetlands that serve as the buffer for the Hillsborough River. So it provides some water filtration benefits as well. It is implicated in several regulatory, through several regulations, actually. So here are a couple state regulations, state statutes that refer to consideration of lands that have been occupied by people. So this is Chapter 267. Is a statute that regards the inventorying and preserving of historical and archaeological sites. This other statute protects unmarked burials, which we certainly have out there. I started this presentation with the list of species that are threatened and endangered and formally recognized as such on state lists. And then there are also some water quality considerations as well. So I guess I would just close by pointing out that the RFI for development of this property is correct in one regard, that the Forest Preserve does present USF with opportunity, but not just the cash liquidity opportunity of a quick sale or lease, but many of these other opportunities that I list here. And I'll just give you a moment to read for yourself. And so, you know, with that, I guess I would be happy to take any other questions you guys might have.